Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing sustainability, deep adaptation, and compassionate degrowth in the face of abrupt climate change, or more simply put, a realistic discussion of where we're at and what we can do. I rather like this jazz intro, kind of has that, film noir, private eye kind of feel, but I may change it up. I'm just going with it for now, but who knows? Let's get into some news articles about extreme weather. Extreme weather being the preponderance of extreme weather being a sign of the fact that the climate system is in revolt or out of balance or out of whack, as it were. This is from yesterday. France hit by the worst flash floods in over a century, killing at least 12, including a nun. In what the local weather agency said was some of the worst flash floods in the Aude River has seen in more than a century. The heavy rainfall brought raging torrents and engulfed homes and swept away cars. Residents in the region have been told to remain indoors, and more than 700 firemen and several helicopters have been sent to bolster the rescue effort. Authorities said many people were stranded on rooftops and would have to be evacuated by air because it was too dangerous by boat. Several deaths were in the town of Trebes, which sits between a canal and two rivers, including the Aude. A nun was swept away by the rapid waters, according to the local broadcaster BFM TV, while other reports said a policewoman was hit by a motorist while attending a weather-related traffic accident. It's like a war zone, said Jean-Jacques Garros, a resident of Villers-Gahinck, one of the hardest hit areas. The Interior Ministry initially put the number of deaths at 13 before revising the toll downwards to 12, though it could rise again. The flash flood struck without warning. At least one victim was carried away by raging waters while sleeping, according to Elaine Thirion, the prefect of Aude. The Vigicruise agency, which tracks water levels in France, said the flooding was nearing a peak last seen in 1891. Yet another 100-year or 500-year flood event. We've been seeing a lot of those in the last few years. And thank you all for posting. Most of these are articles or things that have been posted on the comment section, so thank you. Moving on, I'm going to read this article by Robert Hunziker from October 12th. Peak carbon emissions by 2020 or else. World greenhouse gas emissions must peak by 2020 or it's lights out. That's a message from the IPCC, which has come out from under the shadows of Paris 2015, swinging like a heavyweight champion boxer. And in fact, they've taken off the gloves in preparation for bare-knuckled fisticuffs. The world's leading scientists met at the 48th session of the IPCC and first joint session of working groups 1, 2, and 3, and 1 through 5, October 2018 in Incheon, Republic of Korea, and openly declared that civilization is on track for collapse because of reckless use of fossil fuels, including the beast, unless the beast is corralled, meaning start reacting now, no more waiting around. Peak emissions must be achieved by 2020, a slap in the face, wake-up call issued by the gathering of scientists in South Korea. They intend to change the course of history, or so they claim. Along those lines, 1.5C is an absolute guardrail not to be crossed. Not their words, but it's what their analysis implies. Not a bad idea and worthy of deeper analysis. And it is much stronger than previous pronouncements. At first blush, peak GHG emissions by 2020 seems nearly impossible to achieve, but it's a decent idea and jam-packed full of strong motivation. I agree. Like all hell breaks loose without immediacy of action. In a BBC interview, Helene de Koning, a Dutch climate scientist, said the decisions we make now about whether we let 1.5 or 2 degrees or more happen will change the world enormously. In years past, the IPCC viewed the next century as the timeline for deep reckoning when the climate monster would be the most threatening. That's been amended in a big way. Now, trouble is only decades away, or maybe even 1 decade. Maybe only a few, not several. According to Bloomberg News, the dictum issued by IPCC to avoid outright catastrophe, the world community must invest 2.4 trillion in clean energy every year through 2035 and cut coal-fired power down to as close to zero as possible by 2050. Also, it's absolutely necessary to quickly develop functioning technology to remove CO2 from the atmosphere, an enormous undertaking that might or might not work. Nobody knows because it's never been done to scale. It may require almost as much infrastructure as needed by the fossil fuel industry to emit the CO2 in the first instance. In a word, overwhelming. Or looked at another way, according to the renowned physicist Klaus Lackner's analysis of what's required for direct carbon removal, if you built 100 million trailer-sized units, you could actually keep up with current emissions. Ergo, 100 million trailer-sized units, assuming 55-foot trailers the size of each carbon removal apparatus end-to-end, would extend 42 times around the planet. Oops, onto another subject. According to Bloomberg NEF, New Energy Finance, world investment in clean energy during the first 6 months of 2018 was 138.2 billion, and last year the number was 335.5 billion, of which China accounted for 132.6 billion. It's taken more than a decade to get up to $300 billion a year, and now they insist it goes to 2.4 trillion a year. And it sounds as if it must happen almost immediately. Good luck with that. However, BNEF has qualms about the reality of enough political mojo for that to happen. For example, as things stand today, World Energy Research orgs forecast future energy mix as coal is expected to remain the largest source of power globally into the near future. Cough, cough. In order to curb fossil fuel use, the IPCC generals, climate scientists, leading the charge to world salvation, insist the world community invest $2.4 trillion per year for the next 17 years. That means renewable investments need to increase 7-fold a year, and that brings to mind a slew of numbing questions, including: 1, is it possible to achieve $2.4 trillion a year without a worldwide Marshall Plan type of collaboration among all nations, especially the big boys, gals? The answer would be no. 2, do renewable manufacturers have enough capacity? The answer is probably no. 3, where will funds come from to finance $2.4 trillion a year? The answer is 4, who will take charge and organize the worldwide effort? Possibly the UN. Obviously, nations have to be honest and truthful and have leadership who are willing to do this. 5, will the United States participate? It is the second largest emitter of carbon in the world, keeping in mind the Trump administration is all in 100% behind fossil fuels and a very strong advocate of clean coal, one of the biggest all-time hyperboles, which is so utterly stupid that it is nearly impossible to quantify its ranking amongst leading lame-brained statements of all time. Meanwhile, the US pokes a very big fat stick into the spokes of the IPCC's wheelhouse. As long as Trump and co. remains in charge, climate change is off the table. No discussion, no collaboration with the world, leading to another question. 6, who will replace the enormous shortfall of funding of the United States? Furthermore, the authors of the report assume World governments will embrace their sense of urgency. However, that's likely an uphill battle in spite of their extreme dire warnings, e.g., 1. Count Trump out of the mix. 2. Jair Bolsonaro, who leads the polls for the first round in Brazil's presidency, threatens to withdraw the country from the Paris Climate Agreement, and he intends to open up the rainforest wide open to agribusiness. 3. The UK is pushing ahead with gas fracking. 4. Norway is exploring for oil in the Arctic. 5. Germany, renewables galore. Germany wants to tear down Hambach forest to extract coal. 6. Russia's Putin makes Trump look like a lightweight. Where does the rubber meet the road? The IPCC report says global emissions must be cut 45% below 2010 levels by 2030, requiring rapid, far-reaching transitions in all aspects of society. Every country in the world will require an entire suite of new regulations and behavioral changes, which is one more reason why the US will not participate, as Trump and co. are regulatory assassins, not conformists. And as for Putin, well, forget it. Bottom line, the IPCC group better kick butt and get moving ASAP, because irreversible tipping points that fuel runaway global warming or cause similar levels of crisis are already popping up all over the place. 1. Alaska permafrost erupting. 2. Siberian permafrost erupting. 3. Arctic ice loss threatens massive GHG breakout. 4. West Antarctic ice sheets dropping like flies. 5. Totten Glacier, East Antarctica moving way too fast for comfort. 6. Melting headwater glaciers endanger major rivers of the world like Langkang in China. 7. The Amazon rainforest, mind-blowing, triple 100-year droughts, all within 10 years. 8. The Colorado River Basin down 40%. 9. Ocean plankton down 45%. 10. Great Barrier Reefs, major die-offs. 11. Loss of glacial water towers in Andes. 12. Ocean acidification threatens sea life. 13. Depletion of great kelp ocean forests, and more and more. The number of vulnerable ecosystems overwhelms the imagination. It is staggering. In fact, ecosystems are under stress like never before throughout human history, ever since fire was first discovered. It's little wonder that the world's scientists are putting out a clarion call to save civilization. Here's guessing they experience sleepless nights, night after night after night for too long now. It gets tiring. They're likely fed up, fired up, and mad. Of note, it's important to realize that only scientists see the advent of ecosystem deterioration collapse, because it happens where nobody lives and nobody travels, with the exception of an occasional scientist on expedition, assuming they can be pulled away from modeling on PCs. As for one helpful solution, maybe invite America's Congress to ride along on a field trip to sensitive ecosystems that are starting to collapse, or in fact already collapsing. Simply have a congressperson throw a dart at the globe and then go to wherever the dart sticks. Odds are very good that they'll hit a collapsing ecosystem, or at the least, an ecosystem that is getting ready to collapse, assuming the dart misses the big population regions where no major ecosystem collapses occur in plain sight, because people don't huddle together to live in Antarctica, the Arctic, the Amazon rainforest, the ocean, 2/3 of the planet, or Siberian permafrost. Postscript. According to Earth Justice, Brett Kavanaugh sided with corporations industry to remove EPA protections for clean air and water in 89% of his cases. 96% of his cases ruled against wildlife protections, according to the Center for Biological Diversity. Now he's a member of the Supremes. Ipso facto, bad beginnings make for bad endings. Excellent article by Robert Hunziker. There's a lot in there. Again, where to begin? Where to begin with solutions in the face of all of that? And again, for those who insist that this is some kind of trickery by the UN or by corporate or by countries to get your tax dollars, there's just so much overwhelming evidence. You have to ignore so much in order to fixate on something that tells you that this is a hoax. So that right there is cherry picking. This is how you can tell when something's true or not, when there's an overwhelming body of evidence against very small parcels of, whatever, facts pulled out of asses. And, mountains of evidence, very tiny, tiny, small little, pieces of evidence over here. That's how you can tell if something's true or not, or likely or not. Let's move on. Let's see. Sorry. Had them lined up. Where are they? Here we go. I mean, every other article is about the IPCC. The IPCC report. I was maybe going to read another. I will read another article on that, but I mean, it seems like I've been reading a ton of articles about the IPCC report, and they're all very worthwhile and very good. But I'm going to break them up a little bit. Well, let's add to the list of reasons why we should be worried about climate change, or we should be worried about what it is that we're doing to the planet. We are doing to the planet. Hyperalarming study shows massive insect loss. This is from the Washington Post. The Washington Post by Ben Guarino. Guarino. Mouth's not working. October 15th. Insects around the world are in crisis, according to a small but growing number of long-term studies showing dramatic declines in invertebrate populations. Once again, a new report suggests that the problem is more widespread than scientists realized. Oh, faster than expected, you say. Worse than predicted, you say. Huge numbers of bugs have been lost in a pristine national forest in Puerto Rico, the study found, and the forest's insect-eating animals have gone missing too. I wonder why. In 2014, an international team of biologists estimated that in the past 35 years, the abundance of invertebrates such as beetles and bees had decreased by 45%. In places where long-term insect data are available, mainly in Europe, insect numbers are plummeting. A study last year showed a 76% decrease in flying insects in the past few decades in German nature preserves. The latest report, published Monday in the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, shows that the startling loss of insect abundance extends to the Americas. The study's authors implicate climate change in the loss of tropical invertebrates. The study in PNAS is a real wake-up call, a clarion call, that the phenomenon could be much, much bigger and across many more ecosystems, said David Wagner, an expert in invertebrate conservation at the University of Connecticut, who was not involved with this research. He added, "This is one of the most disturbing articles I have ever read." Bradford Lister, a biologist at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in New York, has been studying rainforest insects in Puerto Rico since the 1970s. If Puerto Rico is the island of enchantment, La Isla del Encanto, then its rainforest is the enchanted forest on the enchanted isle, he said. Birds and coqui frogs trill beneath a 50-foot tall emerald canopy. The forest, named El Yunque, is well protected. Spanish King Alfonso the 12th claimed the jungle as a 19th century royal preserve. Decades later, Theodore Roosevelt made it a national reserve, and El Yunque remains the only tropical rainforest in the national forest system. We went down in 76 and 77 expressly to measure the resources, the insects, and the insectivores in the rainforest, the birds, the frogs, the lizards, Lister said. He came back 40 years later with his colleague Andres Garcia, an ecologist at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. What the scientists did not see on their return troubled them. Boy, it was immediately obvious when we went into that forest, Lister said. Fewer birds flitted overhead. The butterflies, once abundant, had all but vanished. Garcia and Lister once again measured the forest insects and other invertebrates, a group called arthropods that includes spiders and centipedes. The researchers trapped arthropods on the ground in plates covered in sticky glue and raised several more plates about 3 feet into the canopy. The researchers also swept nets over the brush hundreds of times, collecting the critters that crawled through the vegetation. Each technique revealed the biomass, the dry weight of all the captured invertebrates, but had significantly decreased from 1976 to the present day. The sweep sample biomass decreased to a fourth or an eighth of what it had been. Wow, between January 1977 and January 2013, the catch rate in the sticky ground traps fell 60-fold. Everything is dropping, Lister said. The most common invertebrates in the rainforest, the moths, the butterflies, the grasshoppers, the spiders, and others are all far less abundant. Holy crap, Wagner said of the 60-fold loss. Louisiana State University entomologist Timothy Showalter, who is not an author of the recent report, has studied, Jesus, this fly is bothering me, has studied this forest since the 1990s. The new research is consistent with his data, as well as the European biomass studies. It takes these long-term sites with consistent sampling across a long period of time to document these trends, he said. I find their data pretty compelling. The study authors also trapped anole lizards, which eat arthropods in the rainforest. They compared these numbers with counts from the 1970s. Anole biomass dropped by more than 30%. Some anole species have altogether disappeared from the interior forest. Insect-eating frogs and birds plummeted too. Another research team used mist nets to capture birds in 1990 and again in 2005. Captures fell by about 50%. Garcia and Lister analyzed the data with an eye on the insectivores. The ruddy quail dove, which eats fruits and seeds, had no population change. A brilliant green bird called the Puerto Rican tody, which eats bugs almost exclusively, diminished by 90%. The food web appears to have been obliterated from the bottom. It's credible that the authors linked the cascade to arthropod loss, Showalter said, because you have all these different taxa showing the same trends, the insectivorous birds, frogs, and lizards, but you don't see those among seed-feeding birds. Lister and Garcia attribute this crash to climate. In the same 40-year period as the arthropod crash, the average high temperature in the rainforest increased by 4 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperatures in the tropics stick to a narrow band. The invertebrates that live there, likewise, are adapted to these temperatures and fare poorly outside them. Bugs cannot regulate their internal heat. A recent analysis of climate change in insects published in August in the journal Science predicts a decrease in tropical insect populations, according to an author of that study, Scott Merrill, who studies crop pests at the University of Vermont. In temperate regions farther from the equator, where insects can survive a wider range of temperatures, agricultural pests will devour more food as their metabolism increases. Merrill and his co-authors warned, but after a certain thermal threshold, insects will no longer lay eggs, he said, and their internal chemistry breaks down. The authors of the 2017 study of vanished flying insects in Germany suggested other possible culprits, including pesticides and habitat loss. Arthropods around the globe also have to contend with pathogens and invasive species. It's bewildering, and I'm scared to death that it's actually death by 1,000 cuts, Wagner said. One of the scariest parts about it is that we don't have an obvious smoking gun here. A particular danger to these arthropods, in his view, was not temperature, but droughts and lack of rainfall. Lister pointed out that since 1969, pesticide use has fallen more than 80% in Puerto Rico. He does not know what else could be to blame. The study authors used a recent analytic method invented by a professor of economics at Fordham University to assess the role of heat. It allows you to place a likelihood on variable X causing variable Y, Lister said. So we did that. Then 5 out of 6 of our populations, we got the strongest possible support for heat, causing those decreases in abundance of frogs and insects. That's all I'm going to read of this. I'm going to move on. I'm going to link this below. Y'all can read the rest, and it is hyper alarming. And lastly, if y'all haven't seen this news item, I'm going to finish with this. Idaho wildlife official resigns over uproar about African hunting trip. Blake Fisher didn't apologize for killing the animals, just posting the pictures. Wow. An Idaho wildlife official was forced to resign on Monday after photographs of him posing with a family of baboons and other wild creatures he killed in September during a hunting trip in Africa went viral online, igniting a firestorm of criticism. Well, good. I mean, if anything, we can shame these people. We can shame this ridiculous behavior. Maybe we can shame people who buy, SUVs somehow in 2018, or shame people who just drive the largest vehicles possible when they don't really have a need to. Let's start doing that too. I recently made some poor judgments that resulted in sharing photos of a hunt in which I did not display an appropriate level of sportsmanship and respect for the animals I harvested, he wrote. Harvested. Did he eat these baboons? I'm sure he did not. Oh my God, he killed a giraffe too? It's disgusting. Otter, who first appointed Fisher to the 7-member commission in 2014, said he asked for and received Fisher's resignation on Monday. I have high expectations and standards for every appointee in state government. Every member of my administration is expected to exercise good judgment. Commissioner Fisher did not. Was the judgment posting the pictures, or was it killing the animals? I mean, I can't believe that people are doing this in 2018. This is unbelievable. Among the pictures is one of Fisher smiling while propping up the heads of bloodied baboon carcasses, including that of a baby in its mother's embrace. Images of Fisher and his kills, including a giraffe and a leopard in Namibia, sparked global outrage and led to the unprecedented call by former Fish and Game commissioners that he stepped down. The photo of him and the baboons, a family, it's absolutely deplorable and totally contradicts everything that game management is about. Retired Fish and Game Commissioner Gary Power told Reuters on Monday in his letter, Fisher apologized to the hunters and anglers of Idaho and expressed the hope that my actions will not harm the integrity and ethic of the state's wildlife agency. Of course, there's much more to read. I'll be back hopefully tomorrow with another video, but that's all the time I have today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.